A house divided against itself can't stand. And if we fall alone, who will lift us up?
Hatred stirs up discord among us, but love is what binds us together.
If God loved us, we ought to love each other.
And if we say we love God but hate our brother, are we not a liar?
Listen, slow to speech and anger. Listen and gain a brother, for two is better than one if there be one.
Let it be one hope,
One body,
One Lord.
one faith.
one voice to glorify our God.
Walk together in the light as he is in the light.
Exposing the works of darkness. Whoever says he is in the light and hates his neighbor is still in that darkness.
Hate nothing but evil. Let your heart instead be ruled by peace. Pursue it at all times, in every way.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
In Jesus, we are both one.
He has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility.
So care for one another.
Outdo one another in showing honor.
Bridge the great divide.
By acting justly towards all.
Loving mercy.
And walking humbly with our God together.
When was the last time somebody looked at you and said, we need to talk? It might have been today, like on the way in, or maybe it was this past week at work, or a teacher, a friend, a spouse. What happens when that happens to you? Like, what goes through your mind? Start thinking about what were the last like 5 interactions with them. You start replaying what happened. Did they find out about? Did I do something? Did I say something? You start going through your memory, which for me these days feels like more like going through VHS tapes where you have to put it in, pull it out, rewind, fast forward. If you don't know what a VHS tape is, I know I'm getting old. It's great. You know, it's like you start replaying and it has this anxiousness that you carry under the surface, right? Part of the reason I'm thinking about this is this weekend is my 5th anniversary being lead pastor at CedarCreek, which is amazing how fast time has gone. Thanks. And where that started was a phone call from our founding pastor, my boss at the time, Lee Powell, and he's like, how fast can you get here? We need to talk. Like, I was so excited walking out of the K&J with some fresh things to grill on an unseasonably warm day. You know, like I had visions of delicious food in my future, and I got a phone call from Lee, my boss, saying we need to talk. And I'm thinking, can you give me anything other than we need to talk? He's like, how fast can you get here? Awesome. Okay, I'm on my way. You know, I'm like, did I get fired? Is there a crisis? Is there some problem? Is there, what is going on? If he had just given me a clue, well, knowing what I know now probably wouldn't have helped. But, you know, it's like when I showed up, he's like, hey, do you want to be the next lead pastor at CedarCreek? Which presented a whole different set of anxiousness. That's the way these conversations go. When there's a, we need to talk, there's like a, oh, what kind of impact is this going to have in our life, in my life? And what does this mean? And I think for some of you walking in this weekend, knowing what the series was about, you probably have a little bit of that feeling. And the honest truth is, this series is a bit of a, we need to talk. To be clear, this isn't like a Ben looking at you all and saying, hey, I have some things that I need to share with you that I've, you know, that's not what this is about. This isn't even about what our particular church, no, this is really something that I think Jesus did with his followers a lot. He would sit them down and he'd be like, hey, we need to talk. If you want to be my follower, there are a few things that I want to clarify. And so if you could imagine, just as much as you can, that I'm actually seated with you, that I'm shoulder to shoulder with you right now, and I'm trying to learn some of the very things that I'm sharing with you, not as if I'm an expert, but I feel like Jesus invites his followers to have a few of these kinds of conversations. If you could imagine that I'm with you and we're learning from him, I think we may walk away with some really helpful things in a world that's trying to tear us apart. Jesus would sit down with his followers and he would remind them like this. He would say, hey, listen, there's a thief. We talked about this last week as we celebrated our 25th anniversary. There is a thief and his purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy, but my purpose, Jesus' purpose, is to give his followers, it's to invite people into a rich and satisfying life. And so there's a thief. There is this force against what God is trying to do in our world today. In the Greek language, the language that the New Testament was written in, the Greek word is diablos. It's for our English word devil. It means accuser, slanderer. There is a thief that's going to accuse, slander, push, call out, tear apart. Another lesser popular definition is one who throws apart. And he is at work in our world today. And if we're not careful, we're going to let the thief and his works tear apart what Jesus is trying to invite people into, a rich and satisfying life. This is why we are convinced that the local church is the hope of the world. As great as nonprofits are, and there are a lot of great nonprofits, I know some of you serve on them. They're great, and as great as government and politics and our country and all of those things that are being talked about. And as divisive as it is, the local church is the hope of the world. It's the local church that Jesus said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not be able to stop the movement that Jesus is creating. And so it is through the local church that I think Jesus wants to introduce people to this incredible life-changing adventure. This is why we believe that church is a life-changing movement you join, not a product that you consume. It's not the building, it's not the service, it's not the 1-hour thing you do on Sunday, it's not a club that you're a part of, it's not something that you come in and go, hey, what's in it for me? I know that's where some people live. Maybe that's what you've experienced in your past about church, but the truth is, if Jesus were sitting here today, if he were saying, hey, let's talk, he would say the church is always meant to be a movement of people. And the problem is even the church is divided today. Even when you come in, people are pointing and poking and accusing and slandering and throwing one another apart. And we forget that another word for movement is community. That church is a life-changing community. The Greek language for that is koinonia, that the church had fellowship with each other. What does that word community mean? We all have lots of different ideas of what it means, but you could just take that word community and you see that it's common unity. Like Jesus is inviting his community to have a common unity in him. That if we are Jesus followers, if we are a part of this movement, then where is he leading us? And how is he uniting us when the world might be trying to tear us apart? I want to focus on his words, not mine. Because Jesus lived in divided times. If you don't know much about the history that Jesus stepped into, Roman rule versus Jews trying to get religious freedom in the midst of a Roman religion. And then there were Jews versus Gentiles. There were Jews versus all sorts of different sects of people. Samaritans and sinners and saints, rich and poor, healthy, sick, Pharisees and Sadducees and Zealots and Essenes and all of this division that was happening around him. And everybody wanted Jesus' endorsement. And so as he's getting ready to send out his disciples, early on, it wasn't long before Jesus said, hey, I want you to go out, and the message that you're going to tell the world is that the kingdom of God is at hand. Yep, there are Romans, and yep, there are Jewish leaders, and yep, there's this problem, and yes, there's that division, but the kingdom of God is at hand. Will you join the movement that God is inviting you into? And the words that he shared with his disciples to help clarify them, I think, are helpful for us. He said, don't imagine that I came to bring peace to earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I think it's always quiet when I give that verse. It's like, say, what? I didn't see that one coming, Jesus came to bring a sword? Is that what he said? Yes. Jesus came, maybe another word to think of it is to cut away. If you were here last series, Finding Peace, you remember that Jesus did say he came to give us a gift, peace of heart and mind. It's a peace that the world cannot give. It can only be found in him. And so this leads some people to see why the Bible is so confusing. Wait, he just said he didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. Did he come to bring peace or not peace? Am I going to find peace in him, or is he starting a revolution? And taken out of context, this verse has been used to do a lot of damage, a lot of violence, and it's to really miss the conversation that Jesus was having with his disciples. I think the conversation he wants to have with me and with you today. You see, he didn't come to bring violence. He didn't come to start a revolution. Siri's talking to me. He came to cut away. And what he's telling his disciples is it might not bring the peace, another word that you could put in there. It might not bring the comfort that you think it will. Do you want to join? Do you want to be a part of that? He says next, an Old Testament passage. He brings back a prophet Malachi who says, I have come to set a man against his father and a daughter against her mother and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Your enemies will be right in your own household. And some of you are like, man, how did he know? That's what's going on at home right now. You know, it's like everybody's arguing with everybody. If it sounds like your family, well, I'm glad you're here. I mean, Jesus ultimately is clarifying what it looks like to follow him. That in joining the life-changing movement that Jesus is inviting us into may put us at odds with those who want their cultural platform, their cultural thing, their government, their political thing in their world. See, every person, myself, yourself included, every person is tempted and oftentimes has a tendency to look to earthly things to find their security, their value, and their direction. We all are tempted to look around and find something here on earth that's going to make us feel safe and secure, that's going to make us feel like we matter, and is going to help us determine the next steps that we need to take. For the Jews, for the disciples that Jesus is talking to, and I would say even for a lot of Jewish families today, it was their family. It was their family name. That's where they found their security, their value, and their direction. You honor the family name. You were loyal to your family. To be disloyal to your family was considered like a cultural sin. It was terrible. And we're no different. We do the same thing. The basic formula looks like this. We want to find who's in, and that means we have to identify who's out. Our culture wants to look and gather around people on an inside. We all kind of crave this, and then that means labeling people who are on the outside. The people who are in are people who look like me and believe what I believe and affirm what I affirm, and I like you, and because we like the same things, we're in with each other. We have, community, right? And in order to have a common unity, we have to have a common enemy, and that enemy are the things out there, the people out there that threaten or are against what I believe you need to be for, and so this is the source of the great divide. You have a common language, a common enemy, that's who's in, and we're not like those bad people over there, and so what do we do to feel good about the people that we're in with? We accuse, we slander, and we participate in the very thing that the thief wants us to. You know what's interesting is even people who say, I'm really inclusive, I think we should accept everybody, they can't stand the people who don't agree with all the people or all of the terms of what it means to be inclusive. So even groups that claim inclusivity are hypocritical. They can't even live out their own value. Why? Because there are some people who don't see the world that they do, and they can't stand how that might feel in their world. This is what's tearing our world apart. Sound familiar? I mean, it's like this is challenging in part because this leads us to confuse community with conformity. Community is how do we let our common unity help us through complex differences. That's what it means to be a community. It means we have to acknowledge that there are complex differences. We have complex approaches to the same stuff, and it honors the complexity by which we bring our own stories and our own narratives to that. If you have anybody in your life who has a simple solution for what we're facing today, or when you see sound bites that are purporting simple solutions, it's silly. We just need to acknowledge that we have some complex differences. What we're not talking about is our common unity that's helping us navigate that. No, instead, what people want is conformity. They want compliance. Conformity is about control. It's about being the same. It's about making sure everybody agrees with everything that we say, and if not, you're out. And practically, this is dividing us. So a way that we try to talk about community versus conformity amongst our team and our staff is this. We talk about closed-handed issues and open-handed issues, and I think this is a great resource for you. I think this is a helpful way when you start to feel the tensions rise, when you see that there's some complex differences, this is a way to help you talk about it. What do I mean? A closed-hand issue, whatever that is something that's really important. In fact, it's so important, you're holding on to that. You're going to fight for that. An open-handed issue is still really important. It's not that it doesn't matter. We still need to talk about it. But there's multiple perspectives around that we're willing to keep in an open hand. We're not going to divide over it. We're going to keep talking about it. We're not going to let these issues take away or divide us at the expense of this closed-handed issue. Let me give you a practical example in my own marriage. Okay, my wife and I have been married for 19 years. And so this is a fun example. I most of the time, it's like we're closed-handed around two becoming one. We're committed to each other. We want till death do us part. We've got our hands closed around that. Something that becomes challenging is how we navigate our sports teams, because my experience is when you have, a particular person in the family that loves sports and then you have another one that likes sports, usually the person that likes sports gives up their particular team for the person who loves sports. I mean, I don't know if that's true for you, but that's the way that I thought it was going to happen in our marriage. So when I, a lifelong Indians fan, married Lauren, who is a casual Yankees fan, sorry I swore in church, I know that's terrible language, but I thought for sure she would give up her Yankees and become an Indians fan with me, and she hasn't. She can't name a single person on the Yankees team. I don't know why she cheers for the Yankees. Obviously, she doesn't care about our marriage, right? We should divide over that, right? No. You keep that in the, some of you are like, yes, absolutely. You should divide over. You keep that in the open hand, even though you disagree. This is so helpful when it comes to finances, when it comes to how you're going to raise your kids, when it comes to politics, when it comes to how we respond to injustice that we see around us. You should keep that in the open hand, because if we're honest, we have more things in common unity that help us navigate our complex differences. You see this happen in churches today. Some churches put in the closed hand a lot of things. That means a lot of people are on the outside. In fact, the more you have in your closed hand, the smaller the group of people that can associate with you, the more exclusive you become, and the less impactful your life is. And you know what's amazing? When Jesus walked the earth, everybody wanted his endorsement. And they kept asking, are you going to fight for those people? Are you going to fight for those sinners? Are you going to fight for the Romans? Are you going to fight for the Pharisees? Are you endorsing their behavior? And he was too conservative for the liberals, and he was too liberal for the conservatives. It drove them crazy, and so they killed him for it. Because Jesus was pointing to a different common unity. He was pointing to his kingdom, and what his kingdom was inviting us to do was to experience a common unity in a world that the thief is trying to tear apart. And so he was setting the expectations of his disciples, and I think for us, he's doing the same thing when he says, if you love your father or mother more than you love me, you're not worthy of being mine. If you love your son or daughter more than me, you're not worthy of being mine. It sounds like Jesus is telling us we should give up our families, that we should hate our families. No. He's not anti-family. No, he's inviting us to ask the question, what are you really looking to for your security, your value, and your direction? Like, what is the real thing, the real source of your security, your value, and your direction? Are you potentially closed-handed around the wrong things? Because for the Jews, it was their mother, their father, their family name. It was their kids. It was also their kosher religion, their laws religious laws that they needed everybody to follow. It was also their nationalism. They thought that they were sheep living among all of these terrible wolves. It was what was in their closed hand. And Jesus is saying, if you're going to hold on to that more than me, you're not worthy of being mine. The word for it is idol. Not American Idol, where you're a winner. Yeah, an idol. Idolatry is something that's talked about throughout the Bible. It feels like an ancient word, but ultimately it is anywhere we try to find our security, our value, and our direction apart from God. This means that even good things, even important things, can become God-like things to you and to me. You see, unlike the rest of the animals, the rest of the created beings on planet Earth, humans are distinct in one key area. We can't just wake up, eat, navigate our day, Go back to sleep and do that over and over again. I know some of you, you're like, I would love to do that with the work schedule that I have. Or maybe you're thinking of a family member who that seems to be all that they do, right? But the truth is, if you dig a little under the surface, there's this drive that we have for meaning. We need to find love and acceptance. We need to know that we're a part of something that ultimately matters. We have a drive for more that no other animal created being has. Why? Because God created us to worship. We are ultimately created to worship Him. But instead what we do is we tend to bow our life to earthly things. Like, where are you looking for your security, your value, and your direction? Let me give you a few examples. One that's really common, one that's tempting for me, and I think for a lot of us, especially in our American culture, is money. Just think about how we look to the stock market or our bank account or our check for security, to determine our value, and to determine our direction. I'm not saying that money is evil. It's not. It's the love of money. It's the worship of money. It's the holding it in the closed hand and saying, I will fight for divide. This is what matters most. Jesus spoke about this. This is why giving was such an important part of his narrative, because he knew the grip that money could have in our life. Another example is our jobs. It's like we think about our job, the title that we have. Are we advancing up the ladder? Are we getting more and more accomplishments? This is why some people drive their marriage and their family into the ground. They're literally sacrificing at the idol of their work because they want to know that I'm capable of more. Another one is fame. We want to be recognized. Look at what people are willing to do to get 1 million followers on TikTok. We do crazy things. We bow our life to try to find security, value, and direction. For other people, it's comfort. I just want to be comfortable. Don't rock the boat. Don't ask me to do uncomfortable things. For other people, it's their rights and their freedom. I need that. That's where I find my security, my value, and my worth. Again, these aren't bad things. When they become ultimate things, they become idols. For some people, it's their sexuality. I don't want any sexual limits on my life. I want to do what I want to do. You should be who you want to be. Live out your narrative. You do you. That's you. Making your desires the idol, the place where you find your security, your value, and your direction. For other people, it's the flag of our country. It's your political party. It's your ethnicity. It could be anything earthly that could be a good thing that you have made an ultimate thing. Jesus says this in that same conversation: if you refuse to take up your cross and follow me, you're not worthy of being mine. If you cling to your life, you lose it. But if you give up your life for me, you'll find it. So, if this sounds uncomfortable, it's because it is. Jesus came to cut that away. I mean, if it's me, I have a lot of other messages that I would love to preach that are a lot more fun for all of us, you know. Let's go back to finding peace. But the truth is, if you're a Jesus follower, he's going to bring us to places where he says, hey, we need to talk. You may need to put to death that idol, that thing that you keep looking to provide your security, your value, and your direction. What we can't see is when we hold on to that, when we bow our life to that, we end up losing. That's what he says. You lose way more. That idol can't deliver what you think it can. This is why people get to retirement age and they feel empty inside. This is why successful people get to the top of their game and they feel like something's missing in their life. This is why some people live out all of their sexual desires and they still have this nagging sense that they're missing something in their life. Whatever it is, people get to the end of that idolatrous path and they feel empty. And it means the thief has had his way. I think if we're not careful, if we keep holding on to our cultural idols, it's going to tear us apart. So when you're facing a great divide, do you have the right thing? Do you have the right one in your closed hand? Because Jesus may be saying, hey, there's some things that need to come out here and you need to keep them back in your open hand. The bottom line for really this series and for today is we need to let our common unity guide us through our complex differences. We need to let our common unity with Jesus be the thing that we hold on to help us navigate when we feel at odds with people, when we feel at odds with culture, when we feel at odds with ourselves. Put all of that back on the open hand. Even when internally we're holding on to things culturally, we need to, okay, Jesus, you're the source of security, value, and worth. You know what's amazing is this is really helpful in your marriage and in your family. When you feel that heated fellowship go up, not that Lauren and I ever have this, it's like, what's our common unity? Let's hold on to that. And yes, you can be right and you can be together, but you can't always be both. You can be right and you can be happy, but you can't always be both. And so if we're in this together, what are some things that we need to keep in the open hand that maybe we need to agree to disagree on? I'm not saying it's easy, but it can help you navigate your complex differences. It can help you do that with your family. It can help you in the midst of a conversation. When things start to heat up, you can look at people and say, hey, I just want you to know, even though it feels like the temperature's going up, I want this issue, this disagreement, this thing to stay in an open hand where we may agree to disagree because I don't want to lose our friendship over this. I'm not willing to risk our friendship over this. I don't want to lose this connection. I don't want to lose the common unity as we talk about this. Now, the truth is that helps in a practical sense with our relationship, but it'll only get you so far. Because Jesus wants to invite us into a more enduring approach. We should let Jesus guide us through all of our complex differences. Jesus wants to cut away the idols. He wants to take them out of our closed hand. He wants to set us free. He wants to be the place where we find our security, our value, and our direction. Think about this. In the same conversation, he's trying to help the disciples, set them at ease, not look at earthly things for their identity. And here's what he says. He says, don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body. They cannot touch your soul. Fear only God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Like, if you're afraid of government leaders taking control and capturing you and taking away your rights and all, hey, listen, that's a complex thing, but don't fear that more than God himself. Like, Jesus is our security. That's where we find our security, not government, as important as that is, not our freedom, as important as that and valuable as that may be, not our physical health. I'm not saying don't care about it. We should care about it. Just don't live in fear of that. Think about what Jesus accomplished. He faced unfair accusations. People called him satanic, right? He endured injustice, radical injustice. He was the best possible human who was accused and endured the worst possible death, and he came back from the dead. And his resurrection shows us that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how dark it seems, no matter how big evil seems around us, no matter how active the thief seems to be in our world today, at the end of the day, evil does not get the last word. He does. And so we can find our security. We can hold on to him, knowing no matter how discouraged we feel, nothing can take his security away from us. And so we hold that. Jesus also wanted us to remember that not only is he our security, he values us. He values his followers. Look at what he says. He says next, what is the price of 2 sparrows and 1 copper coin? Sparrows weren't worth much back then. They were worth a penny in the local market. All the disciples would have known that. And here's what Jesus was trying to say. Not a single sparrow, as worthless as they may seem to you, not a single sparrow can fall to the ground without your Father knowing it. In other words, he knows way more than we often think he does. He's watching way more than we think he does. He cares way more about what's going on in our world and is probably more involved than we assume he is. When you begin to see this, you begin to understand that you matter to him more than you could ever imagine. He goes on to say this. He says, the very hairs on your head are numbered. I mean, he knows the exact number of hair on your head. That's how much he knows you, which is easier for some of you than others, okay? But he knows everything about you, so don't be afraid. You're more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows. Your worth is not defined by others around you, by what culture says. No, we find our worth from who Jesus says that we are, and we hold on to that. And when you begin to live in the truth that God, the creator of the universe, knows you intimately, values you so much that he sent his son to earth to teach us what life with God was like, to rescue us from the fear of evil, to give us security in him. When you begin to find your security in him, your value in him, then you begin to let him be the primary authority that determines the steps that you take, the direction that you go. And when Jesus was asked, what's most important? What's the most important commandment? Consistently, he said this: you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, all of your soul, and all of your mind. And some stories where this was recalled, he adds all of your strength. With all that you are, love and serve God. We say knowing God is the most important and ongoing step that you take in your spiritual journey. You're basically putting him in your closed hand. It's such a simple statement, but you will never fully arrive here. You never get to the point where you're like, oh yeah, I did that once, at church a while ago. Check that off the box. No, it's something that you're constantly growing in. Knowing God isn't about knowing about him. It's not like, oh, I know that Jesus came and died, and it's not knowing the statements. Christianity isn't a label that you wear on your profile somewhere, or your life, or the way that you're born. No, it's a surrendered life to experiencing God day in and day out. Every blessing that comes is a gift from him. Every challenge that you face is an invitation to know and trust him more. This is what's most important. Put that in the closed hand, no matter what happens in our world. But that wasn't all that he said. He said, and the second is like it meaning equal or similar to that. Love your neighbor as yourself. Another very simple statement. A statement that implies you will never fully arrive. That love is not like, how do we have a mutual exchange of benefit? How do we get people inside and avoid people who are unlike us? No, to love your neighbor, to agape your neighbor, is to sacrifice, to be gracious, it's to be generous. Like he's inviting us to love people. When Jesus is our security, our value, then the direction that he says in a world that wants to tear itself apart and the thief that wants to divide us is, he says, love. It goes on to say this: all of the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. In other words, the whole Jewish scripture, all of Christianity, this is what spiritual maturity looks like. It's not about how much you know. In fact, the Pharisees knew a lot, and Jesus had a lot of harsh words to say to the Pharisees. No, it's how you love God and how you love others. When you think about it from a Christian perspective, Jesus invites us into a third path, not insiders versus outsiders, who's in and who's out. No, Jesus said, for those who are in the family of God and believe in Jesus, you're to love one another as Jesus loved us. This is the commandment that he gave his disciples and he gave us in John 15. And then when it comes to outsiders, people who don't believe what we believe, don't see the world the way that we see the world, don't value Jesus the way that he is, even don't treat us the way that Jesus says that we should treat them. You know what he said we need to do? In Luke 10, he told the story of the Good Samaritan, where the religious leaders around Jesus were so racist, they couldn't even say the word Samaritan. And he said, no, this is what it looks like to love your neighbor. He made the Samaritan the hero of the story. He said that we should love even our enemies. We should bless those who persecute us. That's what it means to let our common unity in Jesus help us with our complex differences. To live this bottom line out, it means we need to listen, we need to learn, and we need to love them, whoever they are, well. We need to listen to them. That's one way that you can love them well. You need to learn from them. That's another way that you can love them well. And then we need to actually love them. We need to let our common unity help us navigate our complex differences. If you listen long enough, you'll find common ground with anybody, even your enemy, if you're willing to value them or see the value that God sees in them. And if you listen to them, you'll give yourself an opportunity to learn about them, to learn about their story, to learn how they came to the place where they see things the way that they do. You're actually valuing them. James 1:19 says, be quick to listen, slow to speak. And you know what happens? You'll be slow to get angry. I think that's great advice for loving people well. And here's what's interesting. When you love them well, you spend time pointing them to Jesus, not just trying to prove your point. It's powerful. It means that when it comes to closed-handed issues and open-handed issues, you keep what Jesus wants us to have in the closed hand, and we keep in the open hand all of the things that we have complex differences about. I mean, within the church, you have churches who put in the closed hand all sorts of things, like what should be on the stage and not on the stage, or what should be a part of the service and not a part of the service. And I think we could just, at CedarCreek, we love to agree to disagree on some of those things. We keep them in the open hand, and we don't need everybody to agree with us. We're not going to divide over that. In fact, our staff, we don't all agree on everything that's talked about in the Bible. You know what we do agree on? On our mission. And the mission that Jesus invites us into, and on the great commandment to love our neighbor as ourselves. We're united on that. We're not going to divide about that, and you can actually disagree on end times and some of the other things, and we talk about it. Let me give you another example. If you're anti-police, you're going to be uncomfortable here. I'm not saying unwelcome. I'm just saying if you need everybody around you to be anti-police, we're not. We want to pray for, encourage, and support the men and women who put their lives on the line to serve their communities. And we believe that the majority of them seek to serve all people, not just a particular ethnicity of people. So if you're anti-police, you'll be uncomfortable here. However, if you are anti-black, anti-Latino, if you are anti any other minority or ethnicity, if you are anti-talking about injustice in our world, then you're going to be uncomfortable here. Because we see Jesus fighting for all people groups, creating a multi-ethnic movement, and we want to learn how to do the same thing. We want to reflect the very heart that Jesus had for all people and how he even went the extra mile to defend those who were incapable or were put in spots of injustice where they weren't able to defend themselves. We're going to speak out. We're going to mourn with those who mourn. And so we're going to navigate holding on to the common unity that Jesus had us, not getting caught up in a particular slogan. We're not going to scold you if you use one, but we're not going to use a particular slogan. We're going to, like, my personal perspective is it's like Jesus is what matters most. And until people encounter the life-changing message of Jesus, the thief is going to tear everybody apart. And so keep pointing people to Jesus. That's what we're going to do here. Let me give you another example. If you think Jesus would vote a straight Republican ticket, or you're convinced that Jesus would vote a straight Democratic ticket, let's remember, Jesus wasn't American. He was Jewish, all right? And here's what's interesting. People in the Republican Party can soundbite Jesus' words to verify that he would fully endorse the Republican Party, and you can also soundbite Jesus' words to make Jesus a straight Republican candidate supporter, that he would endorse that. And you know what both parties fail to do? In fact, what most people fail to do is see that Jesus is king. He is king of all kings, not a puppet to be used in a particular political party. So does that mean we should talk about politics? Yes. Is it important for every single one of us to vote? Yes. And should you allow your faith to guide how you vote? Yes. But put it in the open hand, because we follow the real king that will be here long after America has come and gone. And hopefully, if we remember that the church is a life-giving movement, we get to actually point to something that's going to make an eternal difference. And so, man, I think all of you should show up and vote. And I think you should allow your faith to guide how you vote. But man, every Republican that I know needs a Jesus-loving Democrat in their life. And every Democrat that I know needs a Jesus-loving Republican in our life, so that we can keep in the open hand these important things and talk about it that way. I know, when people start clapping, it's like, okay, let's go. Okay, so here's what that means. Let's listen, not defend. And when somebody says something, even when I say something that starts to trigger something inside of you, let's be quick to listen. Let's learn about their story. If you listen and learn long enough, you'll see them. You know what you can do is say, God, help me see what you see. Because he valued me even though I didn't agree with everything that he said and did. He sent his son to die for me, even though I wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm giving my life for God. No, when I was a sinner, when I was anti-God, he pursues us. He invites us into that same mission. That's what it means to love them well. Keep praying for people. Keep serving people. Stay connected with people. The people who weren't like Jesus, didn't believe what Jesus believed, still loved being around him because he loved people well. This is the life-changing movement. This is what it means to have a common unity, to let it navigate our very real and complicated differences. And it's true, this is hard work. But Jesus came to bring a sword to cut away the places that we don't need to hold on to any longer, so that as a church we can say, in every place of worship, I want men and women to pray with holy hands lifted to God, free from anger and controversy. Another first century pastor said this, I appeal to you, dear brothers and sisters, by the authority of our Lord Jesus Christ, not by the authority of the United States of America, your political party, your favorite hero, your favorite preacher, your own personal preferences. No, by Jesus himself, to live in harmony with one another, not in unison, but in harmony, where we all bring our complex and unique differences to hold on to the one person who's uniting us in this common mission. Let there be no divisions in the church, rather be of one mind, united in thought and purpose. I mean, Jesus himself said, hey, I've told you all of these things so that you may have peace in me, so that you find your security, your value, and your direction in me. Here on earth, you're going to have many trials and sorrows. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. Do you believe that that's true? Do you believe that in Jesus we don't have to be afraid? We can take heart. We can step into this divisive, chaotic season and not be freaking out because we hold on to the one who gave his life for you and for me. So maybe today there's some things that you've been holding on to that Jesus is inviting you to set down. Maybe he's bringing a sword to you today. And I want to give you a minute to not take it personal. This isn't beat yourself up. It's move it out of the closed hand, and let's let Jesus be our focus, our common unity. So I want you, as the bands play, to reflect on these words and prepare to receive communion. Communion is the act that Jesus invited us to participate in, to remember that he gave his body and shed his blood for us. So let's put him in our closed hand together to receive, to live from his security, his value, and his direction in our life.